This is what happens when you don't pay your taxes, kids. The IRS is after Pac Man in this little artwork here. Or he, I don't know, maybe his rainbow fentanyl stash has finally been caught for that. Whatever the case may be, this is Pac Man. I am not going to explain what happens in Pac Man. I think you know what happened in It's Pac Man, you know. But I can do this. We can talk about Pac Man on the NES because it's a little bit different than it may have been in the arcades in the 70s. Now, yeah, Pac Man came out in the arcades in the 70s. And, well, you know what happened. It was very successful. But let's just say some of the ports, some of the home console ports were not particularly as successful. Now, I do own a copy of the Atari Pac Man, but I gotta be honest, I can't really fit it on my shelf, so I'm just too lazy to grab it right now. I don't really have it in my vicinity. So I guess you can believe me if you want to, or you can think I'm a big fat liar. You know, either is on the table. But I guess, you know, a man's word is bond. So all I could say is this. I do own a copy of Pac Man Atari 2600. I will say they did the best they could, right? It's just a little rough, you know. I understand the Atari 2600 is a very limited system, like in terms of its capabilities. It's a bit limited. And it would be rude for me to say it shows, but it kind of does show, to be completely honest. Pac Man, so, you know, in the arcade, let's say Pac Man's moving in a direction. You know, he's gobbling up Tic Tacs, or he's gobbling up little food crumbs, like a little rat, or like a rat chasing the crumbs. Or what could he be eating? What are those little things? You know, a lot of people speculate what actually is it that, what is Pac Man eating? I want to say they're Tic Tacs. I guess we'll go with Tic Tacs. I would say, you know, Pac Man's chasing the Tic Tacs. Let's say he's going from right to left. You know, but let's say he goes up. He'll do that. In the Atari 2600 version of Pac Man, this is what he'll do. His mouth won't actually rotate in the direction he's going. It will just stay in one direction. And I think that was pretty lazy, to be completely honest with you. Now, again, I'm no programming wizard or anything, so I couldn't really tell you whether or not that was possible in the 2600. But I gotta be honest, it's hard to say who's to blame for that mistake, but it does kind of suck that Pac Man doesn't actually, like, you know what I mean? And that was the big problem with that one. Also, some of the sprites just didn't really look remotely like, it didn't really look, also the pellets were literally just squares. Again, all of these complaints are something that it's kind of hard to blame anyone for, because on one hand, the Atari 2600 is a very limited console, so I guess what else could they have done, right? So it's kind of hard to be mad about it, but more or less, it's definitely one of the weakest versions of Pac Man, in my opinion. It's very weak. If you're looking to collect for the Atari 2600, I guess still get it, because it's pretty cheap and it's just Pac Man. But if you already have other means to play Pac Man, I would say maybe hold off. But I have it, you know. If you're very curious to see what it was like, I guess go ahead, right? A little bit of a nothing burger, quite frankly. But, yeah, and also it's really hard to listen to. It goes, bam, 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 bam. Like, it basically kind of just does this when you're playing it. Bam, 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 bam. Pretty boring. It's definitely very ear-piercing, too. I remember when I first tried playing it on the 2600, I did not want to listen to the audio. Also, I have multiple Atari 2600s, and they all have, like, broken controller ports. So it's just, it's not easy, you know. It's not easy getting those things to work. But Well, one of them has a broken controller port, and the other one just doesn't even turn on. So it's not easy. But luckily, I have a 7800 back there. But you want to hear something funny? So that system is supposed to be able to be backwards compatible with 2600 games. But my 2600, or no, my 7800 literally has I'm having a hard time figuring out what the problem is, but I'm pretty sure it's a faulty chip within the system that it literally will not let me play a single 2600 game on it. And I have tested these games on my system that while it works, the controller ports are broken, so I can't really play the games, but I can just see if they work at least. On my 7800, it will not run a single 2600 game, and I've tested all of these games beforehand, so I know they do work without a doubt, and I've tried everything, but I just cannot get them to run on my 7800. And the system works, and the cartridges work. So it must be something, maybe like a faulty chip, because I know there's like a specific chip that actually allows it to run the 2600 games on the 7800. So I suppose that's, must be what it is, right? I guess one could infer. But I got extremely off track. I was supposed to talk about the NES Pac Man, and we started talking about the really rough 2600 port. So, Tenjin is responsible for handling this one. Overall, this port, I will say, is decent. To me, it has only two big glaring flaws. It looks pretty similar to the arcade game. The colors are a little bit off because of the limited color palette on the NES, which I guess I can excuse that. There's nothing that can really be done about that. I think that's fine. What are you gonna do, right? It still looks pretty good though. I mean, Pac Man's still yellow, a little bit more of an orangish yellow than he's supposed to be, but it still looks like Pac Man. I think everything still looks fine. Here's the big problem. The screen has to scroll. You don't actually get the entire maze on the screen at once. You get like almost all of it. And it moves a little bit while Pac Man moves. And that, I'm not personally a huge fan of that in the context of playing Pac Man. That, to me, that's the only real big flaw with the game. Something to think about though, if they made the entire map fit on the screen, Pac Man's sprite would technically not be accurate to the arcade game. So I guess what they did is they chose to have Pac Man and the sprites for the ghosts look just like the arcade game, but in turn, it didn't perfectly align with the NES's resolution. So not the entire maze couldn't fit on the screen. Not a big deal, I suppose. Similarly, I think there's a similar problem on the Game Boy version. Maybe worse. I have the Game Boy version, but I can't seem to remember. It's been a while since I've played it. Game Boy version is similar to the NES one, I know that. Obviously not color though. But it's Pac Man, What's there to say about Pac Man? It's fun, everyone loves it. It's addicting. It's classic. And he has made quite the mark on the video game world, even landing a spot in Super Smash Brothers. Yeah, it's just Pac Man. I guess there's nothing crazy to say about the little yellow fella. Well, I'm gonna split.